So first of all, I am in one of the worst ever locations you could have for a podcast studio. I'm going to turn off studio sound right now. I'll be really honest, I actually prefer the sound of this microphone. Before you make a decision whether you want to record at home or in a studio, how much time do you want to commit to your podcast? All of these things can happen if you're recording by yourself, and they don't happen if you're recording in a professional studio. Welcome to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast back in 2019 just as a hobby. It was called A Vietnam Podcast, and it is still running today. We've just passed 100,000 downloads, and it is the longest running English language podcast in Vietnam where I live. As a result of that and losing my job during COVID-19, I started 7 Million Bikes Podcasts, and we've now worked with over 70 podcasts, produced thousands of episodes, helped with millions of downloads, and helped podcasts get to the top of the charts. I then started Smarter Podcasting to help you make the best podcast possible. So in this episode today, I'm going to share with you the differences, and I'm going to share with you 5 key differences between recording in a studio and recording at home. And the reason for that is I have experience with both. And if you've followed this podcast or if you've checked out my blog before, then you'll know that I can actually make really good quality podcasts in my home setup. In fact, and I don't say this to brag, but I have won awards. So A Vietnam Podcast won an award for the best audio podcast of 2024 in Asia. And I also won best audio producer. So even though I like to think I have no idea what I'm talking about, I also do like to think I do know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share with you 5 key tips of the differences between recording at home in a home studio and recording in a professional studio. And stay tuned for some really exciting news about the first ever podcast studio in Saigon coming very soon from 7 Million Bikes Podcast. So the biggest key difference between recording at home and recording in a studio is, of course, going to be sound. Now, that doesn't mean because you're recording at home, you're going to have bad sound. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to be able to see that right now I'm recording in my front room. If you're listening, hopefully you're going to be thinking, holy shit, he's recording in his front room. That sounds so good. So I'll explain a little bit why. So first of all, I am in one of the worst ever locations you could have for a podcast studio. So because I live in Vietnam, because I live in Asia, they don't believe in carpets here, which is actually amazing. So this is a completely tiled floor. I have big glass windows behind me, which I do have the curtain closed, and I'm in a big spacious room. It's probably like 50 meters squared, something like that. If you were to say that this is where you're recording a podcast and you were a professional, you would shake your head in dismay because it is an awful place to record a podcast. Now, the reason why I'm getting good quality sound right now, it's not the best, but I'm getting good quality sound is a few things. One is that I have the microphone close to my mouth. So one of my biggest bugbears is when I see, even in professional studios, and this has happened to me where we recorded a podcast in a professional studio for a client, and I received the audio and immediately I could hear it before I even saw it. Then I watched the video and I could see how far away the microphone is. Now, again, if you're watching, you probably can't even see the microphone right now. Let me just check. What does the video look like? Yeah, so you can't even see the microphone right now. The microphone is only a fist away from my mouth. And if you look up any advice about microphone placement, it's going to tell you the same thing. Now, I learned this from my good friend Lewis Wright, who taught me everything I know about audio, but it also is backed up by everything that you can find online. So I'm always really confused when someone has the microphone far away. So if you want to have good quality sound at home, make sure you have the microphone placed close to your mouth. Now, I'll show you the difference. Okay, you can see the microphone here. If I take the microphone away here, it's going to sound really bad. And I'll tell you one reason as well why it's going to probably sound even worse. Is the other reason why we're able to get such good quality sound at home, and I've talked about this a million times before, is because of Descript's studio sound. So if you don't edit with Descript, go to the show notes, click the link. It is my affiliate link, so if you do sign up, I will get a small percentage, but only if you sign up. I cannot recommend Descript enough for sound quality. That studio sound will take average sounding audio and it will make it sound amazing. So I'm going to show you an example right now. I'm going to turn off studio sound. I've done this before. And then when I went back and watched that, I thought it was going to be really dramatic. you're probably not going to notice a massive dramatic difference, but I'm going to turn off studio sound right now. Okay, so now I'm still speaking into the same microphone, but I've turned studio sound off. Now, the reason why it's probably still sounding pretty good is a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, I have the microphone close to my mouth. If I move it far away, and I have done audits with people before, and they say, why does my audio quality sound so bad? Because the microphone's all the way up here. It really, really is important. The other reason why the sound quality is sounding so good right now, even with studio sound still turned off, is because I'm using a dynamic microphone. Now, I remember I was so overwhelmed when I first started with all these terms and phrases, and you have to learn so much. And it is why I started 7 Million Bikes podcast. It is why I do this podcast, because I learned so much that I realized I could actually share that knowledge with you. So I'm sharing that today. So the biggest thing you want to get is a dynamic microphone. Now, a dynamic microphone means it only captures the sound in front of it. It only captures the sound in front of it. And I remember looking at so many different diagrams about omnidirectional, bidirectional microphones. I can't even remember the other names, all these different graphs and hertz, and it can be really confusing when you start to get into it. And that's why Lewis has helped me a lot, because he does have a degree in this. But you don't need to have a degree in this. You just need to know, choose a dynamic microphone. When I first started, I was using a condenser microphone, and these are so heavily recommended on blog posts for podcasts. I have no idea why. This was pre-AI, but now even more so, I think, because AI is just reading all these old blog posts that recommend, for example, and no offense to Blue Yeti, but it recommends the Blue Yeti microphone. I even went to visit a friend's house. This was a couple of years ago, and he's like, oh, I've got the good Blue Yeti microphone. And as soon as I looked at it, it was a condenser. So a condenser microphone picks up no matter what you set it on. So often these condenser microphones, you can change them to omnidirectional, which picks up the sound in every direction, bidirectional, which only picks up the sound on either side of the microphone, which you might think be good if you're doing an interview podcast and you're sitting opposite somebody. But with a condenser microphone, it doesn't matter what setting you choose, it's going to pick up the whole room. A condenser microphone picks up everything, versus a dynamic microphone, which only picks up which is right in front of it. So we're going to turn on studio sound right now. Okay, so now we're back with studio sound. So a condenser microphone picks up the whole room. From what I've read, the only reason you would use a condenser microphone is in a professional studio where it is completely soundproofed. Now, that is quite difficult to achieve. You can't just put up some acoustic panels and it's soundproofed. It's sound treated, which is going to help keep the sound in the room. So like I said right now, I have tiles, I have windows. That means the sound bounces off of shiny objects, shiny surfaces. That was one of the first things I learned from Lewis, right? And if you go back and listen to some of my older podcasts, even though we put up blankets and sheets and duvets and comforters and towels to try and block those shiny surfaces, the quality of the audio was still not great. And that's because I was using a condenser microphone. Right now, the quality of this podcast is probably pretty good because I'm using a dynamic microphone, I'm close to it, and I'm turning on studio sound. Now, compare that to a professional studio. Is it going to be much better? Yes. How much? That's hard to say, but it's going to be better. We've hired studios in Barcelona, London, and Paris, and they generally use really high quality microphones. So they use the Shure MV7, which I have one of those. Those are like a $600 microphone. The one I'm using right now is the Miono PD200X, which I've done a review of before. This microphone is less than $100. I'll be really honest, I actually prefer the sound of this microphone to the Shure MV7. I think a lot of people get them for looks. Joe Rogan uses it. They want it to look good. As soon as you watch a video, you recognize that microphone. I'm not blown away by the quality, but it is a higher level of quality. It is technically better quality. So generally when you have a studio that you hire, you're going to have better sound quality because they have better microphones. They should know how to place them, but that's not guaranteed because, as I said, I've used studios and they're not always the best. So they should know how to place them properly. It is why I'm getting good sound here in a room. And then once you're in a studio, they will have much better sound treatment. Now, some of them may be soundproofed. Most of them will be sound treated. So a soundproofed room, as I mentioned, is somewhere that is completely silent inside. And I've only ever been in one once, and it was in Lewis Wright's studio. So he used to work for a music production company, and I went along to check out his studio. I could only last, I think it was about 2 or 3 minutes inside before I got queasy and I had to leave. And the reason I had to leave is because it was so silent. I'd never been in a room before where you literally cannot hear anything. And this is purpose-built and designed deep in a building. Lots and lots of treatment to make it completely compressed, if that's the right word, to make it completely muted to all outside noises and sounds. And this was used for high-level music recording, so they would have singers come in and they needed next level quality. This is the type of level that you need for music production. For most podcasts, you don't need that level of soundproofing, but you will want some sound treatment. So most studios are going to have things like an acoustic carpet. You can get carpets that, like I mentioned, I'm using tiles right now. So if you can have a carpet down that can absorb that sound, they're going to have acoustic panels up. Everyone's probably seen what those look like. You can put up acoustic, I've forgotten the name right now, but they go in the corner of the room. To be honest, I've read so much on these things that they don't actually do that much difference. And I know I've said it a million times, but right now I'm in a completely unsound treated room, lots of shiny surfaces, and I think the sound is pretty good. But as I mentioned, look out soon. There's going to be a 7 Million Bikes podcast studio coming very, very soon. With a professional studio, the sound quality will be even better because of all those reasons. And they should have, if they're not in a sound treated room, they'll be in a soundproofed room and in a very quiet location. The biggest difference between a studio and recording at home is going to be the sound, but you can get good quality at home, but you really got to know what you're doing. So if you're not sure, get in touch with me. Go to 7millionbikes.com and book a call. All right, let's go to key difference number 2. So following on from what I've already talked about, one of the key differences is equipment. Now, I'm quite blessed. I'm here at home and I have all the equipment I need because I actually transport this and take this to remote recordings when I'm working with clients. So I have most of the equipment. For a lot of podcasters, especially people who are just starting out, you might be starting with zero equipment. And you can get started for pretty cheap. You can get pretty cheap microphones as well. A lot of them are now USB microphones, which plug directly into your computer. It used to be that you needed XLR cables. You needed a mixer to be able to plug that XLR cable into, then save it on an SD card, or then put it into your computer. It was a bit more tricky. Then obviously now podcast has made the massive shift to video, where most podcasts these days, I don't know about most, but a lot of podcasts, especially new ones, are on video as well. So it takes a lot of equipment, and sometimes I get blown away when I look at everything I have. And I didn't buy everything overnight. I've been doing this for 6 years. I literally bought about one piece of equipment at a time. Some of it was gifted to me, and I've built up enough equipment now. And as I mentioned, we're going to be opening a studio in Saigon soon, and I'm going to be moving that equipment in there. But I still have to buy a lot more as well. So the biggest difference is if you're going to record at home, you're going to need to buy some equipment. It depends how much and depends how in-depth you want to get. Some people just spend $100 on a microphone. Some people spend tens of thousands of dollars to kit out a home studio, get all the equipment, the sound treatment. If you hire a studio, it means you don't need to pay anything up front. You can walk in, press record, and all the high-level equipment is ready for you to use. So that would be a big, big difference. If you want to just go in, record, you don't want to buy all the equipment, you don't want to store it, you don't want to learn how to use it, then go and use a studio. But if you're happy to buy some equipment and learn how to use it, then you can record at home. Now, key difference number 3, and maybe this should be number 1, this is one of the biggest ones, is the cost difference. So to hire a studio anywhere in the world, and as I mentioned, we recently hired studios in London, Paris, Barcelona. The prices were massively different. Paris was way more expensive. But I've looked at studios in Singapore, Dubai, nearly every city in the world has podcast studios available for rent. There's none in Saigon yet. Now, those prices vary wildly. So it can go anywhere from $50 US, 80, all the way up to $200-300. It really depends on the quality of the studio. I've seen some studios for rent where it is literally just a couple of microphones in a room at a desk that is probably the main meeting room. It's not been sound treated, doesn't have a huge amount of equipment, but it works for a podcast. Then I've seen other ones like Podster in Singapore, where they have 3, 4K, 8K cameras, they have sound treatment, lighting, everything, furniture. So all you need to do is go in and press play. So there is a massive, massive price difference. So if you want to book a studio, you're going to pay anywhere from $50 to $200 per hour. As I mentioned, if you want to buy the equipment at home, it varies wildly. You can go anywhere from, to be honest, you can go anywhere from $0 you could record on your phone video. I'm using my iPhone right now to record this video. I have a microphone, but I could record on my phone as well, the audio. If you know me and you know my podcast, you know I advise very, very strongly against ever using your phone microphone or your laptop microphone as well. But at the end of the day, that is one of the best things about podcasting is it is a really low barrier to entry. So if you want to start with $0, you can. Wouldn't recommend it. But going up a little bit, you could start with a microphone for $50 to $100. As long as you get a dynamic microphone and make sure it plugs into your computer with USB, you can record on your phone. So you can do a home setup. You can do a home studio for relatively cheap. But like anything, you could also spend tens of thousands of dollars if you wanted to on a studio as well. So if you already have a podcast or you're thinking of getting started, have a big think about what do you want in terms of quality, in terms of ease of life. Do you want it? I know a lot of people that just don't want to learn how to use all the equipment. If you want an easy life and you just want to walk into a studio and have someone press record and then give you the files, then I would recommend getting a studio as well. Just think about what's your budget, how much do you want to spend, but the cost comparison between a home studio setup and renting a studio can be very, very different. All right, key difference number 4, and this is a big one, is time. So if you're going to set up at home, you've got to build in the time it takes to set that up. So as you may know or may not, depending how much you watch this podcast or how much you follow me. So I have my other podcast I've talked about, a Vietnam podcast, and I record those episodes at home right behind me in front of that window. I close the curtains. I set up 2 microphones, the chairs, the backdrop. I have 2 lights. I set up 2 cameras, all the XLR cables, the PodTrack P4. I would say before my guest arrives, I probably spend at least an hour setting up all that equipment. Now, I will admit that's quite high level. You might just be recording online. Even then, if you're just recording online on Riverside or the Script, Squadcast or Zoom, you're going to have to make sure that you have all your microphones set up, your camera's in the right place. You might be worried about lighting. You should be worried about lighting. You're going to have to make sure your guest has all of that as well. It's never as simple when you're recording yourself that you just show up and then just press record. Maybe it is, but you're probably going to have to spend a little bit of time setting up that equipment. Biggest difference with a studio is you have to take into account the travel time, obviously. So you have to leave your home, you have to go somewhere else to record. But in terms of the time of recording, you should be able to just get in, sit down, have the technician press record, and then you do your episode. Technician presses record again to stop recording when you're done, and you can walk away with your files. So recording at home, again, depending on what your setup is and how involved you want to be, can take a lot longer. Or could take a lot quicker as well. It really depends on what you're doing. But think about, before you make a decision whether you want to record at home or in a studio, how much time do you want to commit to your podcast? And number 5 is professionalism and brand image. So think about, with your podcast, whether you have one right now or you're thinking about starting one, how do you want it to look and sound? If you're making a podcast for your business, then I would highly recommend you record in a studio or in a professional setting. So we've worked with businesses in some of the nicest buildings in Saigon. We've gone and recorded overlooking the river, brought all my equipment to there so we can still get a really professional look. And I'm really proud of how it's turned out. But I'll admit, it looks nothing like what we've done when we've recorded overseas or hired a studio. It takes that to the next level. So if you want your podcast to look professional, you want to promote your business, then I would really strongly recommend, no matter where you are in the world, look it up, go Google it. You will find a podcast studio near you, unless you're in Saigon, where there's none until very soon. I would recommend using a studio. If you're going to record at home, doing video, it's going to be really difficult to get that professional image for a business podcast. Go check out a Vietnam podcast. You'll be able to see what I do in terms of the setup I just described behind me. I think it looks amazing, but I will admit it is still not as good as it could be. It is not as good as a professional studio with a 3-camera setup, 4K recording, big bright lights, really good microphones. I'm so proud of my setup, but I'll admit it's still not as good as a professional studio. So have a think about how you want it to look. If you're just recording audio for a business podcast, that's fine. I would recommend that you can still do that at home. I would say you don't need to go to studio if you're not recording video, because as long as you get a decent dynamic microphone, use the Script Studio sound and place it close to your mouth, then I think you'll be able to get a really professional and good sounding podcast for your business. But if you want to do video, then I would record in a podcast studio. So there are many advantages of recording at home. Obviously, you have no rental fees. You have no travel time. You have full creative control as well. It also gives you lots of time and gives you lots of space to make mistakes, which we all do. And you won't even know from watching this podcast. I've edited so many of my mistakes out. So you have much more freedom for that. You can also record at any time. So I've been actively looking for podcast spaces here. And actually, some of those buildings close at 6 or 7 because they're designed for offices. They're not designed for podcasting. And if I wanted to record after 7 p.m., for example, I would have to pay extra. So it does give you much more flexibility. You can record whenever you want, whenever you have time. And it does give you that freedom to make as many mistakes as you want and nobody can see what you're doing. It does also give you full creative control. So as I mentioned, I will set up the backdrop behind me. So I use what I have at home, but I can make it look really, really nice as well. If you're hiring a studio, you have to use what is already there. And it's always more comfortable and private to record at home than going into a studio. So those are some big advantages. But some of the disadvantages of recording in a home studio is, of course, as I mentioned, the high upfront cost. If you want it to look really, really good, no matter what level you want to record at, you're going to have upfront costs as well. And not everyone has that. With a studio, you only pay for what you use. It means you can spread that out. So instead of spending $10,000 upfront to get it looking and sounding as good as you want, you can just pay a few $100s every time to do that. And another big disadvantage is the time it takes to set it up. And I didn't mention earlier as well, the time to clear it away as well, which doesn't take as long to set up because you're just quickly taking everything apart. But for me, it takes me at least an hour to set up before a podcast and at least half an hour to put it away afterwards. So you got to factor that in as well if you're going to record at home. And then one of the biggest problems of recording at home, which completely takes away from that flexibility I mentioned that you can record at any time, is external noise pollution. Now, I'm in a really nice, completed apartment building. It's pretty quiet most of the time. But there are other times when I've gone to record a podcast and suddenly they start drilling upstairs because they're doing some renovations. And the worst one that happened as well was I actually had a guest here and I was about to record and they started doing construction in the hallway right outside my door. They were digging up the tiles. Well, not digging them up because I'm on a building, but they were pulling up the tiles, doing lots of banging, lots of drilling right in the hallway outside. Obviously, anywhere you are in the world as well, you may be in New York or Idaho or anywhere. There could be honking outside, construction outside. I've had clients who have been editing their podcast and they put a note with it saying an ambulance started at 13 minutes. So can you take that noise out? Again, the Script Studio sound is incredible. It does take a lot of those noises out, but it's really off-putting to do a podcast when somebody's banging in your ear right next to you. So that is a big disadvantage of recording at home. And that ties in as well that it is difficult at home to do soundproofing and acoustic treatment as well. And that does tie into spending a bit more money as well. And the biggest disadvantage, as already said, is it doesn't look the most professional if you're recording at home, if you're doing a podcast to support your business. Now, there is a reason why I'm starting my own podcast studio in Saigon. Not only do you have access to much more professional equipment, you're going to get superior sound quality and video quality as well, which may be really important for your podcast. Depending on the travel time, it's also much more time efficient. You just step into the podcast, record, finish, and leave. And it's also just a much more comfortable and nice environment for you and your guest if you want to make the most professional podcast you can. And then also, of course, with a professional studio and a technician there and professional equipment, you should have no tech hassles at all. I'm sure if you're like me and you run your own podcast with your own equipment, you've had it where you go to press record, something doesn't work, or even worse, and I hate to admit that I've done this, you finish your podcast and you realize you haven't pressed record on one of the many devices that you're using. If you're doing video like me, I have to record on the phone, on my second camera and the microphone, and I'm not going to lie, there are times where I have either forgot to press record. I haven't done that in a long time. There are other times when one of the pieces of equipment has stopped working or the SD card or the memory has gotten full. I remember before I was using my phone in a cafe for a remote recording and the phone overheated and stopped working. All of these things can happen if you're recording by yourself, and they don't happen if you're recording in a professional studio because you have somebody looking after you and you have professional equipment as well. And one of the best things about getting good quality audio and visuals is it saves on your editing time. So whether you're hiring somebody else to do that or you're doing it yourself, when you have that good quality audio and visuals, it makes editing a breeze and it makes the final product look amazing. There are obviously disadvantages for using a studio. One is the cost. You may not be able to afford those weekly or monthly fees. There is less flexibility. You can't just record whenever you want. You have to book the room, be there on time. You have to leave on time as well, which I also had with a client who went way over the time that we had booked, which causes massive problems as well. And then obviously there is the travel required as well to get to the podcast. And as I mentioned, there is obviously the travel time to get to the podcast studio as well. So which one is for you? It's really up to you. Think about all of the things I've talked about in today's episode and ask yourself, which one do I want? Do you want to spend the money up front, learn how to use all the equipment if you don't already? Do you want less superior video quality and audio quality? Are you happy with that? Are you okay with the visuals maybe not being perfect? Then absolutely go for it at home if you want more flexibility and you just find it easier and quicker to record at home. If you want a more professional looking podcast, if you don't want any hassles, you want to just come in, have someone press record and then walk away with your final files, and you don't mind spending that little bit of extra money, then I would 100% go for a studio. So wherever you are in the world, look up studios near me. If you're here in Saigon, go to 7millionbikes.com, go to services, and you can book a podcast studio there. If you want to work with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, go to the same website, 7millionbikes.com. There's a button in the top right that says Talk to Neil, and you can book a time with me and we can discuss how 7 Million Bikes can help you make the best podcast possible. So thank you very much for tuning into this episode. Don't forget, rate, review, subscribe, share, all of that good things. In fact, share this podcast with someone who is passionate about podcasting, whether they have one already or not, and want to make the best podcast possible. I'm looking forward to seeing your podcast. If you want to send it to me so I can check it out, then send it to me as well. Or if you want a free podcast audit, I'm happy to do that as well and feature you on Smarter Podcasting, and I can share how we can help you make the best podcast possible. All right, cheers.